2023, the first evolution hour of the year. I was beginning to wonder whether or not I was going to be able to get on. I was getting a little bulky connecting up with Restream, but we're on here for the moment. So I called attention to, whoops, there we go. Something like that. Boom, boom, boom. To our wonderful patrons who are the reason why I can continue to do this in a reasonable amount of panic instead of a catastrophic amount of panic. So let's stop our sharing and bring our mug up, and we can see where we are. Of course, we're getting into the tail end of replacing Darwin, Nathaniel Jeanson's lame attempt to resolve the evolutionary record in a way that fits the flood. Not working. But I wanted to call attention to a little sidebar that pops up that's going to be relevant to things that are going to be appearing in volume 2 of The Rocks Were There. Nick Zentner, Central Washington University, a geologist, has been running a long series on the Baja BC concept, which has to do with the interesting issue of which chunks of real estate along the Pacific coast might have actually been much farther south at one point, hundreds of millions of years ago, based on paleomagnetic data, and how this has been in the consternation battle with quite a few geologists in the field who just look at the geological spots and they're not buying it. So there's been this long back and forth debate. And one of the most recent installments that was just out on the 4th has a new paper by Basil Tikoff that's helping to resolve some of these little things. I'll be putting the linkages up to both the video and Nick Zentner's website, where you can download this paper and a whole slew of other stuff. I mean, it's like a cornucopia. So any of you geology groupies out there who would like to get caught up to speed on an awful lot of these wonderful geological issues about the formation of the West Coast and the Rocky Mountain orogeny and all the rest, we'll have a lot of fun with this. The upshot is that the coast is rather jagged back in the day when we're talking about 100 million years ago. And the issue about what was going on with these geological formations has to do with big terrains that are out in the Pacific, that instead of quite a few of the models that the paleomagnetic people are trying to challenge has to do with the notion that these plates would be basically hitting flat on like that. But what if a plate hits on an angle and you've got a jagged coast? So where it's ripping pieces off and fragmenting things and twisting and turning stuff around and folding and ricocheting off one another like two cymbals coming together. The hit and run model that Tikoff is talking about. And so in part, some of the debate apparently that's been vexing the crowd that are the geologists versus the paleomagnetic people has to do in part conceptually as to how they're thinking plate collisions are occurring. And the younger generation people often can view it in a different way than otherwise. Anyway, this brand new paper that's going to be in a memoirs volume that's coming out this year of 2023, you'll be able to download that. So I just brought that up because it's really neat. If you catch this, Colton, you're going to want to watch this because it's an absolutely delightful thing, and downloading the paper as well. It's quite delicious. The Zentner stuff will be in a nice little info box in the new book in relation to the whole Pacific region that is just inexplicable from a creationist point of view. That the geological discussions that are going on are so far removed from the cartoon model of the catastrophic plate tectonics or Walt Brown's idiotic hydroplates that I think Kent Hovind is about the only one that still accepts that as plausible. So all of this will be really delicious stuff that we're going to keep the new book as current as possible. But back to our little pal, Nathaniel Jeanson. And this little sidebar, the part 2 relates to a 2021 post from Jonathan O'Brien at creation.com. That's about crystals, which is more geology stuff. He's riffing off of a paper by Phelps from 2020 that I'll be putting a link to, and particularly the Rice University press announcement about it. which I'll also be putting a link to. And it relates to whether or not long crystals can be occasionally found in pegmatite, which is a magmatic mineral that cools fairly quickly in just a few years. And they're playing bait and switch at the creationists because they're like showing pictures of emeralds and the like. But that's not what the papers are talking about. And so, oh, hi, Barbara. Happy New Year, Barbara. And so if you look at the O'Brien post versus what's going on with the actual papers, you can see, they're not matching up. But the main attraction is our dear Nathaniel Jeanson. He's slipped past now all of those charts that I've been boring you with for the past few weeks, back in 2022, about these linear species formations. Now he's on to a new gig, which are going to have a few more little charts. This one relates to the idea that speciation should be now very slow because the original created kinds are going to be heterozygous and eventually fission off increasingly homozygous, zygotic genetic offshoots that are supposedly less likely to speciate in his model. And he's riffing off of the first example. Let me see if I can, whether or not he's got a little chart in here for me to show you. Eventually gets around. Yeah, actually, all that'll be a little bit later. He's simply describing it at this point that if you have a species mix which are where a lot of the variations that are occurring in them are homozygous, he's treating that as a demonstration that his larger model of rapid creation in the beginning and then tailing off is correct. Things do not look quite so good when we get into it. Oh, yeah. Hi, Benjamin. The paper that he brings up, and now at last, after all of this chart stuff where there was no new technical literature at all, he's finally brought in a new paper, which is a 2016 one by May from Nature, from Scientific Reports, which for some reason Jeanson keeps on calling science reports. He doesn't actually even have the journal accurate. But this one is about a particular species of bull in Asia, which is potentially under stress from the environment, and therefore they're looking at the genetics of it and trying to find out how best to preserve it and whether it occurred, the guiles, whether they occurred by perhaps hybridization and all the rest. So he cites this paper from 2016. All he's citing it for is this homozygous, that most of the variations between it and other species relate to certain little sections in the genes. And in fact, the original paper explains it much better than Jeanson implies. But the problem comes with what's in that actual paper, because it's very specific how they determined that the species was likely a hybrid cross, complete with chromosome losses, which is interesting because our species underwent the same kind of a thing, which creationists tend to deny. And yet, objectively, these are in the same kind, the bovine kind, and therefore he's tacitly accepting the idea that chromosome losses can take place within a barament. But it gets worse. Because this particular paper went into the background of the history of this species and found population peaks at around 600,000 and 80,000 years ago, and then bottlenecks occurring at 200,000 and 40,000 years ago, which reflected climate shifts that were going on in the range of these animals. Now, why would you have this up and down situation correlating with climate shifts if it's all taken place within the post-flood period? You'll notice that Jeanson is not terribly detailed about any of this stuff. And it only gets worse because in this paper, they were comparing the species to another taxon, the water buffalo, Bubalus. I just love that awkward name. Of which there are two varieties. There's different lineages that are in the period from Mesopotamia westward, and then there's another group that's more exclusively in the Far East. Nothing whatsoever on this issue in Jeanson, but I was kind of curious to find out more about these little critters, and I'm glad I did. First of all, the split that's relating to their formation, the water buffaloes, goes back about 900,000 years, and there's a new paper from 2020 by Zhang that I'll be linking to, which will go into those little details. And that would be, oh, by the way, yes, I'll put up here, this is the May paper that he's dealing with, Jeanson, and it went into quite a lot of detail, as you'll be able to tell from the charts, about these bottlenecks and population shifts, and then the phylogeny data info. Anyway, the Zhang paper, Asian water buffalo domestication history and genetics, which goes into that in wonderful detail. I'll be putting the linkage up to that. And then there is the fact that they were domesticated, even though they go back 900,000 years. There's a complex domestication history between these two groups, and that's going back at least 6,000 years in Asia, which, spoiler alert, is like at the beginning of the universe, according to young Earth creationists. And worse, they have an archaeological record. So there's a paper from 2004 that I'll be linking to, which has some stuff on that. And also a 2008 paper from Yang, which is about the Chinese end of the mix, to put all of that into perspective. And apparently the Harappa culture in the Indus Valley were trading the water buffalo by 2500 BC, which is 200 years before the flood, according to the creationist chronology. So you might get the impression then that Jeanson, once again, has not really thought through the implications of baraminology for kinds by picking on existing species. Supposedly later on in the chapter, he's going to be dangling with fossil data, which I'm really looking forward to. But all he's doing in this zone is dealing with the existing species, but he's not really dealing with the existing species. He's dealing with teeny little snippets of them. And if I can find this information quite easily from just bothering to read the paper that he cites, why are we to be terribly impressed with the rest of his argument? At this stage, Jeanson has now hit a whopping 326 citations in his book, of which only 161 are technical. And of that, over 58%, I would argue he's misrepresenting, this May paper being yet another example of it. So he's barely averaging one citation per page at this point. It's not a huge book to begin with, and it's not heavily documented to begin with. So you can understand why Jeanson hasn't exactly set the house on fire. The same thing happens, as we'll be moving eventually in his new book, which will be the one we're dealing with once I finish up with replacing Darwin. His traced book from 2021, I've gotten a copy of, and so I'll be able to go through that one. That's one that is so off the wall that even fellow young Earth creationist Robert Carter is kind of dumping on it as technically implausible. So, another thing that popped up, I didn't put a link in on it, but if you follow Jerry Coyne on his Why Evolution is True website, one of the things he put up is commenting on, I did a thing on Twitter about it though, about we're well past the anniversary of the infamous 1998 Intelligent Design Wedge document, which was predicting that by 2002, they were planning on intelligent design being a significant player in the scientific field. And by 2018, they were anticipating that intelligent design would be creating this tremendous revolution as intelligent design concepts are being presented farther and farther afield and moving beyond the sciences into the arts and politics and culture and all of this stuff. Spoiler alert, no, that didn't happen. And worse than that, intelligent design material is becoming more and more peripheral. The biocomplexity journal has just a handful of articles, and the coin bit went into a current example that will be discussed in Rocks for Their Volume 2, because it relates to the claim that our human ankle and foot must have been designed, and it's rather superficial on that. And Lentz did a posting on it, commenting about how threadbare all of this argument was. And Gutsick Gibbet, I brought it to her attention because she'll want to probably take a look at that. But the Douglas Axe, it's basically biocomplexity. His biologos issue organization has apparently just stopped functioning. He's no longer under salary there. They aren't getting enough money on that. And that was, biocomplexity is the one and only journal that was operating from the intelligent design perspective. And that means that we have to switch over and look at the group that's still busy beavers, and that's the young Earth creationists. So intelligent design is pretty much fizzled out as a viable competitor, except in their little niches. I mean, they still have conferences and they have people together. They had they have a cadre down in Brazil. They've got them in various cultures where probably, a few advocates, half a dozen or so, can act as focal points, and they can bring down lecturers like Steve Meyer and others, and they'll hold conferences, and they'll feel terribly impressed. But none of this is having any impact either in the regular scientific field or with their big rivals, the young Earth creationists. So the focus that I've been doing over the last few years, where I've been continuing to pay more and more attention to the young Earth creationist operations at ICR and Accent Facts, is of relevance, because the intelligent design community just isn't getting any traction. There are only about a dozen active members, and if you look at the people who typically post at the Discovery Institute, that's the intelligent design movement right there. You could get them all in a room, and that would be it. Whereas at least the young Earth creationists have a broader range of people. They have more heavy-duty PhDs, particularly Nathaniel Jeanson has a real honest-to-gosh genetics degree, and so their output in terms of the technical papers, because you have the Answers Research Journal, you have the Journal of Creation also operating off of that. You have often semi-technical stuff at Acts and Facts, although yet another harbinger of potential doom is the fact that Acts and Facts, which was normally a monthly magazine, and a quite glossily produced one. I still get the bloody thing free. And it's available online. You can download the PDFs and all that stuff. Not very current issues typically, but after a while it gets available. They've shifted in the current year, 2022 on, to bi-monthly. So it's dropped from 12 issues down to 6. And the magazine hasn't gotten any bigger, but it's about the same material. And there's such a small number. There's Brian Thomas and a little bits of stuff from Jonathan Sarfati once in a while. You have Nathan Cups. You've got John Gudiuza, who's the now head of the Institute for Creation Research, and he's pushing all of his alternative to natural selection. We'll be mentioning a lot of that in the book and that as well. So what we're looking at is an interesting period that's in a way kind of the counterpart of the Republicans trying to figure out whether or not they have a speaker or not, which they now do, McCarthy, that the creationist movement has younger generation people that are coming along who are challenging a lot of the viewpoints that are presented by the old guards, the fossils up in the castles at Institute for Creation Research and Answers in Genesis, and the one that's had its offshoot, Creation Ministries International. Although there is a lot of crossover going on, but issues on the geological end of things over catastrophic plate tectonics, and Gula uses notions about rejecting natural selection that's actually driven some creationists out of that. You've got that air quotes new creationism that Joel Duff follows from the sidelines to kind of see how that's working out. It wouldn't be at all surprising that we're going to see quite a shakeup in the anti-evolution biz. A lot of the same names will continue to run so long as they have finances on this. They'll continue to do that, but I can't see them avoiding indefinitely the problems that are facing them. Part of that has to do with the archaeological issues that are coming into the fore that you find, and other areas about climate science that you have both the AIG and ICR being very skeptical of climate change. This, of course, goes way back in conservative politics and all that anyway. But that means that they're bumping up into some other technical areas that they've been peripheral to. They haven't really made a big deal about it, but there's been considerably more articles on these things popping up at ICR and AIG more recently, which is kind of locking the barn door after the barn has not only opened but is burned down. Because it's really difficult to defend that kind of climate skepticism in the 21st century, in our 2020s, because we have so much more data and so much more empirical circumstance of floods and droughts and freakish weather and tornadoes taking place in the wrong spots and rivers flooding over and all of this stuff. So I expect to see a lot of tumult to be going on in that area. Some of the stuff relates to the fact that an awful lot of the heavy-duty creationists are geriatrics like me, and they've been kind of looking, although they put a shiny face of young people, racially diverse with women and the whole 9 yards on their public faces. But in terms of their actual writers, a lot of them are my age or older, and they don't seem to be sucking in quite as much new blood as they might need to become a viable circumstance. Meanwhile, intelligent design is kind of imploding. So it's going to be fun to see what's going on in the anti-evolution biz, both in terms of the focused anti-evolution stuff, as well as whether or not the intelligent design, oh, hi, Command Cyborg. Welcome to the year 2023. Isn't it so much different than the year before? We'll see if we can manage to make it through the year without tremendous upheavals in politics and warfare and climate issues and all of that. So these are now serious cutting edge issues. Although if you got $100,000, you can buy a 1,000 horsepower electric car with a 500-mile range. That's where the technology is now. I think that air vehicle, and Motor Week just did a thing on that. So if you got a hell of a lot of money, Mercedes and quite a few of the other ones at the high end, that's the measurement that you start seeing. These high-end electric vehicles are having really powerful engines and really large range. So we know the battery technology is such that you can easily have a 300, 400, 500-mile range on a vehicle. If you want to pay the money to have that kind of particular battery structures and the like. I think the Air is interesting because apparently it's built by a company that started as battery manufacturers. So they've got kind of proprietary skills as to how they can make the most out of all that. So it's going to be an interesting time, a delightful little 21st century that we'll see more and more stress in the environment to deal with, and wonderful new technologies that are coming along that can compensate for some of these things. And so if you're young at heart and curious and wanting to dive into the world, it's going to be a fascinating place to see. And hopefully we can avoid not screwing it up catastrophically for the next 20, 30, 40 years so that we can kind of ease into that new world of improved technology. And then, of course, we've also got things like flying to the moon again, and whether or not we're going to have supersonic airliners again. And there's a whole bunch of stuff going on that's going to be fun. and find out if we can avoid keeping the batteries going down on our Wi-Fi and or smartphones. So at least today it's way snowier. Yeah, it's been kind of up and down here. We still have remnant snow here in Spokane. We had a relatively mild winter. It was often very cold, but not a huge amount of snow. And that's been the case overall here in town in Spokane. Outer areas, as you get out into the rural areas outside of our little bowl here in Spokane, it can get that way. But when I went over for the Christmas holidays, the passes were the worst I've been in quite a few times. I just happened to drive up the Quality Pass at the very point that they were saying chains required. So it was a funky little drive getting through there. And it was cold and icky for a while there. There were ice all over bloody Seattle for a while. For a day, the city just ground to a halt because there was kind of like an ice sheet on almost every street down there, and people were sliding all around, and they say, "Don't leave your house." So fortunately, then the weather picked up, pulled up into the 30s and 40s, and the stuff cleared away, and people were able to get around pretty good there. But for a while, yeah, rather icky. That kind of roller coaster climate thing is kind of what you would expect from a system that has ever larger amounts of energy pumped into the system. So you have hotter oceans that are expanding things and shifting the jet stream around, which whiplashes far more spectacularly in a lot of these models as we get more and more energy in the system. So you can get tremendous cold snaps and deep down to where it's causing troubles for every so often with growing citrus in Florida. And then as well, you can have these switches back to where you're getting droughts and heat waves and the like. And so it's, as one climate scientist described it a while back, and I think it's the best analogy I can do, what we're doing with the environment is like bungee jumping on a roller coaster. You can't quite tell where you're going to go, but it's probably not going to be good. Expecting more rain within the next week, a bit warm for normal in Spokane. Yeah, it's mild enough. We've gotten enough to where the snow is whittling down. And if we can avoid the kinds of things that are troublesome here, are torrential rains where you can get flooding. Ice storms are potentially a really serious thing in anywhere along the Pacific coast, because an ice storm, and well, in fact, anywhere, because those ice storms can take down power lines very easily. And so you can end up with people without power. And if it's terribly cold, you're freezing to death. So these are all things that we're going to have to be dealing with much more in terms of a generating system that is more resilient, to the extent that more people have self-reliant electric grid where they have their own electric generation from solar panels and the like, and a broadly structured and diversified system, even down to the point, I mean, the new high-end electric trucks that are coming along are ones that you can use them to power your house in a pinch. You just plug your house into the car and draw off a bit that for a while. So we're getting into an entirely new mix, and we're going to be using more and more innovative technologies, independent of whether fuddy-duddies have a problem about it. I mean, they're older people who look like me, but nonetheless have their brains stuck in 1970, are going to be very puzzled by the rest of the century. But the rest of us will be making do and doing in very ingenious ways. So anyway, we managed to do a full half hour, and the signal's running rather well. Anybody that did not get books can do so at any time and give them away as wonderful birthday gifts and Albanian Labor Day gifts or whatever, to remind our Evolution Slam Dunk, the first one, and then volume 1 of The Rocks were there, and we're working on volume 2. And then, of course, for the fiction lovers, there's the Paralogs of Fog, volume 1 and volume 2, and I'm currently working on the third story. And then there will be 9 more to come. So at the very least, retiree RJ will, to the best of my ability and the best of help from friends and the Patreon support that I get on these, I'll be doing things until I drop at the keyboard, and enjoying all the fun, because the amount of information and excitement that is available for things is absolutely wonderful. And I see absolutely no reason why stupid people should be diminishing that. I mean, they may be a nuisance temporarily, but there's much too much interesting going on. Oh, yes. Forgot to say, remember to like and subscribe and all that jazz. Yeah. Let everybody know about the channel, that it's sporadic and funky, but always has links and things in it. That's a general principle that I want everybody who does videos to do, which is you want to have links to what you're citing. And in my case, I restrict it to full text. So even though I may be mentioning at times papers and books that I have access to, but if you can't have access to them, that's not going to be terribly helpful. So the advantage of something where you can read the original material and make up your own mind is really important. And that's another reason why I like Nick Zentner's stuff, because although he's not as tech savvy to where he puts linkages typically in the descriptions of the videos that he does, nonetheless, his website has all of that stuff beautifully organized, and it's like absolutely magnificent to be able to go there and download and read all those little papers. And the video that I'll be putting a linkage to on that is rather useful, because it gives you insight as to the shop talk level that goes on in geology, and that would be the case with anybody discussing any technical issue, if you were having geneticists or anybody else running. So Brian Stevens, sorry late for the show, but we'll watch it again anyway. Well, I was a little I had the restream kicked in a little bit earlier. I probably would have gotten on about 12:45 or 12:30 even, but boy, it was a balky there, and I had to reload the thing several times and all that, and then finally, bloop, it kicked in. So anyway, we got our little show in there. We'll be proceeding into now the tail end for the next weeks of the Jeanson book, where he'll be completing his end game. I'd be surprised if he even gets up to like 350 sources for the whole bloody thing, which is compared to thousands that I have in my technical works on there. So if more and more of the people who are criticizing anti-evolutionists go at it from that source level, I don't think they can stand up the wind that would be occurring, because there's so much material available. It's always good if you're in a particular area. Dan Stern Cardinale is a geneticist, so he approaches it from his material. He doesn't have to give himself a crash course to understand what pedigree mutations involve. And the same thing with Erica and others. So you have the kind of dilettante types like me, who are the self-taught, look into it, all of that. But I always have a tremendous admiration for people who are in the fields knowing that, in the same way that Jackson gives an informed understanding of the biology end, and a useful window, because, of course, since he's a current college student, not somebody who went to college back in the Nixon administration, he's immediately aware of the cutting edge and the material that's being discussed at that college level. And there's just no substitute for that level of expertise. I can catch up with it fairly quickly because I'm not entirely dim, but nonetheless, the more people that get into the field and do that, it will be the death of 1,000 cuts. As if it's a circumstance where anti-evolutionists of any stripe, or people purveying woo of any stripe, will realize that there's going to be not one or two, but a bunch of different people coming at them with rigorous material that are open access linked, so that anybody that can follow up on it and display it right in front of you and say, check this out, that's going to be a difficult thing for them to be able to deal with. And the fact that people at no cost like me can do this, other people can as well. So I invite anybody that catches all of this stuff. You don't necessarily have to be razzle dazzle video. If you want to put in video links and go the kinds of levels that Apologia or Vice Rhino or others do, or Potholer and others who who do much more sophisticated stuff where it's pre-edited and structured. Same thing that Erica does a lot of that material as well. I give hats off to them. But it's also possible for the talking head to do that and do it at minimal cost or no cost at all, and put all that information in. So there's a bunch of different approaches that people can do with it, and the more of us, the merrier, because we really want to make life miserable for creationists now, don't we? I think so. It's something to look forward to as a 2023 benchmark to deal with. So we've got 35 minutes in. Are there any questions from the gang directly? If not, I'll be likely to be phasing out here, and we will then, once it's finalized, of course, then I'll stick all the information in there, and you can find out more than you ever wanted to know about the biogeography and genetics of water buffaloes. Okay, so everybody stay safe. Watch out if there's we're still in Washington State to the point of where it's not like mandates for masks, although I carry one around in my pocket just to be on the safe side. And it gets some variations in other areas of where you might be deal with local material, and watch out for any of the things. If monkeypox is the thing, worry about that and proceed accordingly. And don't listen to people at Epoch Times. Okay, we'll end the stream, and we will see you all next week. Don't accept any wooden penguins.